clothing and the textile industry at that time. All of those profits circulated back into those communities. So in places like Lancashire and Yorkshire and the East Midlands, the south of Scotland, where you had a thriving textile industry, all of that money was flowing back into the community in a way that kind of Adam Smith envisaged when he talked about the value of capitalism being a positive thing for society. This was what he imagined. He imagined that money flowing back locally. So, the grand civic buildings in the Yorkshire and Lancashire towns that were textile towns were built and paid for with textile money. The schools, the almshouses, the public parks, the swimming baths, all sorts of fantastic civic amenities were paid for with the surplus of that industry. And it created a lot of benefit for those that lived there. But that needle has shifted. All of a sudden, we've got coal-driven power, we've got the start of chemical dyes, we've got a rising amount of pollution, but consumption is still very, very low. But it is the start of the swing that we're seeing today. Okay, our next big skip forward, that is actually me in the top left-hand corner. It was one of my colleagues drew these slides for the TED Talk. He thought it'd be funny to put my tash in there. So the 1970s. Okay, so now we're now at the end of another period of extraordinary change. So what has happened in this period? A number of very significant things. Firstly, synthetic materials have been not just invented, but have been perfected and broadly distributed, and now we have clothes made from polyester, from nylon, from acrylic, which were cheaper to produce, and we've got huge advances in dye technology, again, all based on oil-based dyes, aniline dyes. So, we've got vivid colors, we've got print, we've got clothing, all of a sudden becomes very, very affordable. The other very big change that happens is that from an industry that is broadly distributed, where the owners of these industries are local to where those factories are based, we now have a period of very considerable consolidation. So we go from thousands and thousands of small distributed mills to a very small number of very large industrial global conglomerates. So we've gone from local capitalism to global capitalism, and we've got businesses like ICI and Courtaulds and others who scoop up loads and loads of smaller businesses and consolidate them into very large, much more efficient, but much larger, more centrally distributed production facilities. But also the ownership position has changed very dramatically. So the people that own these businesses are not from the communities where those factories are based. They don't care about those people that work in those factories. Their kids are not in the same school. They're not shopping in the same butcher's shop. Many of them are hundreds of miles away, and in fact, some of them are thousands and thousands of miles away. And that relationship and that duty of care between the owners and those people that work for them has completely disappeared. And the natural progression from huge factories in the UK is to think, well, actually, you know what, we can do this cheaper if we just move all of that somewhere else. So all of a sudden in the 1970s, and I remember it quite clearly, we started to see made in Hong Kong labels appear in our clothes for the first time. And, I remember it being big news at the time. I was born in 1972, so it was later 70s when I became aware of all this stuff. But, this was a change. Clothes started to feel different. The materials felt different. I had a cat that loved to eat acrylic. It was really weird. But all of a sudden, certain jumpers would get chewed. And this is when I first remember acrylic. We were like, why on earth is the cat only eating this jumper and not that one? But the cat really liked the feel of acrylic in its mouth when it chewed it. Anyway, that's an aside. So all of a sudden, we've gone from an industry that cares about the people, that's local to where it's made, that has connections in that community, to something that is completely divorced and is entirely, frankly, at this point, focused on money. The owners of these businesses are in it. These are shareholder-driven businesses. Shareholders in these businesses want profit, and that is why, we've seen this huge change in the industry. Now, we really are starting to see the needle dial up. But in the 1970s, and again, I remember it quite clearly, whilst clothes were made out of synthetics, there was far more oil, the carbon footprint of everything that we were making has gone up. The level of industrial pollution has gone up quite significantly. But consumption levels were still quite low. I mean, I'm looking around this room, there were certainly people who were alive and well and shopping for clothes in the 1970s and 80s. And as a kid, I was obsessed with fashion. I loved fashion. Everything, the wall of my room, my bedroom walls and my schoolroom were covered with pages of Vogue and Elle. I was obsessed with fashion. But I probably bought new clothes 2 or 3 times a year. I would have to wait until the end of the season when the sales came on because I didn't want to buy a lot. I wanted to buy something really nice from brands that I really liked. And I would buy clothing very, very infrequently. And much of the clothing that I bought then, I still have and wear now, 35 years later. Consumption was much lower. And none of us, in that period, felt like we weren't cool and fashionable, despite only buying clothes once or twice a year. We didn't feel like, we didn't feel bereft of fashion for the 70s and 80s and 90s. We all felt like we were totally cool. We just bought about 10% of the clothing that we do now. Okay, I apologize for this graph. I was going to split it into 2. It's an absolute disaster. It's everything that Ted says you should never do on a graph, but I'm just going to point at it. There's a couple of things that are really important here. The blue line is the price of clothes. It's the Consumer Price Index, UK price of clothes. It was sort of creeping up a little bit until we get to about 1990, which is the birth of people like Zara and so on. Fast fashion companies, H&M, Topshop, we know they're older than that, but this feels to me like when things really started to kick off. And look at how the price of clothing declined. This is the average price of clothing. So what happened was those guys in the fast fashion world they looked really, really cheap. Compared to your average, Marks and Spencers and so on, in that day and age, were making good quality clothes with good quality materials, most of it made locally, made to last. But all of a sudden, they started to look incredibly expensive because these guys had come along and made them look expensive. So they had to follow suit. So everybody starts to move in the same general direction. We've sort of plateaued a bit now. But, over the course of about 20 years, the cost of our clothes halved. Now, this is what everything else did in the same period. The cost of everything else doubled. So versus all of the rest of the things we buy, our clothes were now 25% of the price they were before. And then, funnily enough, what happens to the volume? It starts to do the opposite. We start to buy more and more and more of this stuff. And at the same time, obviously, because we've got far more clothes than we ever had before, the utilization falls off as well. This is what global population does in the same time. So obviously, population has gone up. The volume of clothing and the population were tracking pretty much parallel for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it goes off the chart. So apologies for that. Now, what's happened to the price of our clothing? Now, in the 1850s, a dress cost about a week's wages. Beautiful cotton dress, printed fabric, lovely. It would have cost a week's wages, and it would have probably been worn for years. Today, you can buy a dress for less than the price of a cup of coffee. That's half an hour's wages for most people. Minimum wage in the UK is now around about 10 quid. That's half an hour's pay. From a week's pay to half an hour's pay. And of course, at that price, who cares about this stuff? What do we value this stuff? How much can we really invest in a purchase that's so cheap? We spend more on a cup of coffee. You can easily buy a loaf of bread in London for significantly more than that. You go to Harrods, they're £7.50 a loaf. It's, I'm sure you all know these figures, but last year, there were over 100 billion garments manufactured globally. That is up. I can't remember how much it's up, but I remember working out that in the last 20 years, we've made 1.7 trillion garments. if you just extrapolate a couple of different bits of data. Somebody at Royal Holloway told me about 4 years ago that there was enough clothing on the planet then to clothe the next 6 generations of the human race. It's a pretty staggering statistic. The other staggering statistic, there's a lot of staggering statistics in the fashion world now. 30% of all the clothing we make is never sold. In my TED talk, I had some fairly bad statistics about the clothing industry. I've done a sort of top trumps of global fashion's badness. So this is like, I don't know what to call it, but flop trumps, I don't know. So, I mean, I'm going to skip through these fairly quickly because most of you know all of this stuff. But, you know, our industry is staggeringly bad. Over 10% of all global greenhouse emissions come from fashion. 22% of all global insecticides. So that's basically 1 in 5 insects in the world are being killed by fashion. All of the environmental toxicity stuff. There's a world of bad stuff happening. Human exploitation, the amount of landfill, 20% of global water pollution. I mean, it just keeps going on. 34% of ocean microplastics. 70 million trees chopped down for viscose. I mean, we know that viscose is better than a lot of other fabrics, but we're still chopping down a lot of trees. The water consumption in a lot of textile products is absolutely staggering. That is in the growing of crops. You know, we're trying to grow cotton in places it doesn't want to grow, and the amount of water that is used in making textiles, printing those textiles. It's an absolutely staggering number. There's more fossil fuel use. But, I mean, the one for me that is most, and this is why community clothing is here, is the kind of socio-economic damage that it leaves behind. So we've now got to a point, you know, when the clothing industry and the textile industry moved to Hong Kong in the 1970s, it stayed there for a while. And then eventually Hong Kong got a bit expensive, and so it moved into mainland China. And it moved into mainland China for a while. But now it has learned how to be mobile. So it is moving all the time. And every time it moves on, it leaves behind a trail of economic and social disaster that other people are left to pick up the bill for. In the UK, I did have a map in my TED talk. I don't think I've included it in this one. I haven't, no. But we used to employ about 1.6 million people in this country in the production of textiles, which was about 20% of all jobs in this country. And today, it's less than 100,000. And what has been left behind are communities which have been gutted by the loss of these jobs. Nothing has stepped in to fill these voids in these communities. I mean, we are paying universal credit to people. You know, people's lives are just about being supported. I mean, they're not really. But the loss of the sense of pride in the work, the loss of the workplace, the loss of the sense of community that you have with the people that you work every day, all of that has disappeared. It has been ripped away. And I work in Blackburn, which is a town that was a textile town. At one point in time, nearly 50% of all jobs in the town were directly textile related, and that has all gone. Today, the number of textile jobs, I think at one point in time it was about 40,000 jobs in Blackburn with textiles. Today, there are probably 200. So, for me, this is one of the biggies. I mean, I am an environmentalist. I am a nature lover. As a kid, I wanted to be a wildlife cameraman. That stuff is important to me, but this is the thing that community clothing focuses on. And what's happened to our pollutometer? Well, it's gone bananas. I mean, this is driven not just by the increasing carbon footprint of the textiles and the products that we use, but it's been driven by the consumption and it's driven by the waste. I mean, it's, you know, we all know that the planet's on fire. Okay, the UN set a goal for the fashion industry of reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 90%. That is a pretty whopping target. And you might feel like it's unsurmountable or insurmountable, I don't know which the word is. But when you think back to a couple of things, firstly, a third of all the clothing that's produced is never sold. Well, there you go. You've taken 30% off right there just by getting rid of the waste in the system. That's an enormous amount. there's another interesting statistic. 28% of the clothes we buy, only 28% of the clothes we buy are ever worn. 72% of what is in our wardrobe is never worn. So nearly 80% of what we buy is just useless. So if you add those two things together, and then you make some small changes to the way that what is left is produced, you reduce the carbon footprint, you move to better materials, you move away from some of those synthetics, you reduce the waste in the system, you bring things closer to home. Actually, all of a sudden, a 90% reduction in greenhouse gases doesn't seem so mad. We then do some simple things like, we go back to some of the practices of the past, things like wearing secondhand, repairing things, valuing our clothes and reusing them and recycling them, and all of a sudden, actually, this 90% target is perfectly achievable. So, as I see it, in the world of clothing and fashion right now, there are two big camps. Camp A over there, they're the kind of same but different. These are the people that will tell you that what they're doing is sustainable. They call things sustainable. They use a bit of recycled polyester, so therefore they're sustainable. But really what they want is to keep on selling you the same amount of stuff in the same kind of way and just hope that you ignore it and forget about it. Anyway, then there's Camp B, and Camp B is the camp that says something radical has to happen here. We have to change, we have to throw the whole thing up in the air and start with something that's completely different to what we've got today. And that's the camp that I'm in. That's the camp that Community Clothing's in. And there's quite a lot of people in that camp. And Kornit are in that camp as well. Anybody that is a big disruptor of the way things are used today is in this camp. And I include some quite contentious folk like Extinction Rebellion. Fiber Shed is an amazing organization that says we should only wear what we can grow where we live. So it's a bit like bioregionalism in food, but in clothing. If you can't grow cotton where you live, don't wear it. Grow what you've got on your doorstep. So in this country, that would be going back to flax and wool. We could all do it. It requires some change in consumer thinking, but it's perfectly possible. We all did it for a very long time. Earth Logic is another really nice philosophical workplace that kind of is thinking about gross changes to the way the system can operate. I mean, there's lovely things like Zero Waste Leeds, who we work with, community clothing exchanges, clothes swaps. When I was a kid, jumble sales, second-hand shops, clothes exchange, the school exchange for school uniform. Every piece of school uniform I had pretty much had already been worn by somebody else. It was really simple. You took your old stuff back and you got the next size up. And that system worked for generations and generations, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. Because the new stuff got so cheap that it almost wasn't worth going to the bother of, now you can buy a whole school uniform for Tesco for £7. Why? It's like it costs you more in petrol to drive to the school exchange, so why bother? So all of these things are things that we know how to do, and they're things that are coming back. Right, this is another busy slide that probably wouldn't pass muster at TED, but so I had the idea for community clothing about 7 years ago, and the idea was really simple. How can we offer a really nice, sustainable, ethically made, locally made alternative to what I see as the kind of bad side of the fashion world? There are loads of factories in the UK that are underutilized. People tend to buy a lot of simple, basic things, and most people would prefer to buy something good that supports people that live in the community that they're from. And that was the idea behind community clothing. How could we do that and make it affordable? That was the challenge. So we wanted to make, there are loads of great sustainable clothing brands in this country. Many of them make in my factory, some of them make in Jenny's factory, but they're all quite pricey. And for ordinary people, they look, even Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis seems expensive today compared with people like Primark and so on. So for a lot of people, those sustainable brands were way too expensive. So my idea with community clothing was really simple. We have to provide a good alternative, long-lasting, durable clothes made out of good stuff. People paid well for doing it, but also make it affordable to as many people as we can. So we try to benchmark our prices at the kind of top end of Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis. how could we do that whilst using really expensive materials like cotton and wool and linen and making them in really good factories in the UK where wages are really high and the textile workers are really well paid? Well, this is what we did. So this is your normal fashion industry model. The people that make the stuff, and I'm being really quite generous here, get 25% of the total pie. So you spend £1 at, most clothing, sort of high street clothing brands, about 25p of it goes to the people that make it. That's everybody. That's the people that grow it, spin it, weave it, dye it, print it, finish it, cut it and sew it. That's how much they get, which is not very much. So we worked out that in order to sell at the same price and make it in the UK, we had to build a business model that looked like this. So in our model, 65% of that money you spend, so 65p in every pound, goes to all of these people. And where we can, they're all in the UK. Certainly, all of this is done in the UK. Most of that is done in the UK. Quite a lot of this is done in the UK, and that one. The growing is the only bit at the moment that there isn't any in the UK, but we've actually started planting our own flax. So we're now growing our own flax in a couple of locations in the UK, trying to restart the flax industry that was everywhere in the UK until cotton came along and wiped the floor with it. So that's our model. It's completely different to the standard model. It's a tiny little margin. So what did we do here? Well, we design, marketing, transport, admin, and retail. What do? Well, we just made it really, really simple. So we don't do new collections every season. We don't do influencers. We haven't got a PR agency. We use the same factories every season, season after season after season. We work with those factories in long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships. We give them large orders that they can make whenever they have time. We don't force our product on them because it's not seasonally, it's not important that we get new product in every week. I think this year we've launched 4 new products. Our sales are growing very nicely. Over the last couple of years, we haven't taken a single editorial photo. We've not done any marketing at all, and sales have continued to grow. It's a radically different business model. This is what it is. Non-seasonal, enduring styles. How are we lowering the overall carbon footprint of the fashion industry? Well, we're doing that by trying to discourage people from buying new stuff all the time. We're trying to make them clothes that not only will physically last, but in terms of the style, will be things that they will want to wear for 20, 30 years. Every garment we try to design, we design it with a lifetime that we think is very, very long. So we don't do a lot that feels very of the moment. We do things that we feel like are going to be things people are going to wear for a very long time. We use the lowest impact fibers where we can. We've got tiny clothing miles. We design everything around commonality. We use the same fabric across multiple products, and we're using the same fabrics year after year, so we have no waste in our system, and we never ever discount, ever. We've never put anything on sale ever in 6 years, and we don't plan to ever, because nothing that we make has a shelf life that is related at all to the time of year it's in there. So our sweatshirts that you see on the website today are going to be there in 6 months' time. They're going to be there in 6 years' time. So, what are we doing? We're creating jobs, we're restoring economic prosperity, and we're restoring pride in these local communities by doing all of that stuff there as close to the market as possible. And we're making it affordable, we're making it ethical, we're making it sustainable, it's traceable, it's transparent, it's zero waste. It's really, really simple. It's a really simple idea that looks quite a lot like how things used to work 20 or 30 years ago. And we think we can build a new clothing economy. This is the thing. I think people are worried that by radically changing the shape of the industry, somehow we're going to wipe out all of that economic value. And the simple answer is that's not true. If you think about what a new clothing economy looks like in the UK, there are growers, processors of those fibers. There are spinners, dyers, printers, weavers, textile collectors, rag and bone men, as they used to be called. Why do we not have clothing recycling coming with our bins every week or every fortnight? We should make it easy for people. Recovering textiles, recycling obviously is part of this, but not just recycling, reclaiming textiles and making new out of old. designer remakers. There are starting to be, I mean, the winner of last year's BFC Vogue Prize was somebody who makes new clothes out of old. You know, this is something that we all used to do, my parents' and grandparents' generation. This was standard practice. These people have disappeared, but there could be these people in every town in the country. There could be, you know, there need to be sewing shops, there need to be repair shops and alterations, recyclers, and second-hand retailers. You know, again, when I grew up, there were second-hand clothing shops everywhere. Now it's just charity shops. But there were big businesses. There was a place called Flip of Hollywood in Edinburgh, which is the size of this room times 2. Just rails and rails of second-hand clothes, all carefully edited. This is nothing, none of this stuff is new. It's all stuff that we used to do. But all of these are jobs. You know, this is where we are now. We're about 62 billion industry in the UK. This is the number of garments, about 3 billion new garments, and I call them the bad ones. I mean, this is the stuff that I think we need to get rid of. At the moment, there's about 50 million good garments and about 50 million second-hand. Move all of that over here, you can still have an industry that's worth 52 billion, half of it can be second-hand, and 600 million garments are the good, you know, this is the good stuff. So this is everything that was in that new economy. This is all about remaking, recycling, growing locally. All of the good things that have gone before can be made to happen. And you know, what does this mean for jobs? I mean, at the moment, we've got about 560,000 people involved in the selling of new clothes in this country. 94,000 in the making. 36,000 selling second-hand. Well, that can all change. I think we can probably create something like 450,000 jobs in the making and remaking and processing and growing and repairing and recycling of clothing. Second-hand jobs, second-hand clothing retail, as many people employed as selling new retail. So this is more jobs here than we've got today by shifting the industry. So this is more money in people's pockets, that's greater economic value for everybody, that's rebuilt communities, that's lots of fantastic skilled jobs that people can be proud of. I think this is something that we can all work towards, and this is certainly where community clothing is trying to head.
Patrick.
This is my last slide.
Oh, good, perfect. Because otherwise you're talking about creating jobs, I might not have a job.
All right. All of a sudden, with this here, we swing that pollutometer all the way back down into the green section there. This is a model that allows us to radically reshape and get us to this point where we've got what we call this happy planet clothing. Thanks very much. Sorry, I overran.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. That's, as you can see, there is a lot to talk about, and but we also have some shows coming up that we're aware of time. Bobby, come up and have a chat to us about the next element of fashion in the era of Web3. I think the NFTs, the metaverse is seriously interesting for us all right now. So, Bobby, come and have a chat. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Wow, I never knew this existed. Amazing. So I'm going to pick it up from where you left off, essentially, and we're going to go into the future. Whoa, careful the eyes. By the way, hot pink is the color of 22, just so you know. So we're picking it up from the 2000s and now 2020s. So what's happening? Our world is changing. You've noticed this, I guess. Now you have NFTs on your digital wallet, and you're trading with it, and you're looking at Bitcoin and all these things. It's quite confusing, but actually there's one constant through all of this, is that what's driving this new economy is not the industrial complex or the big companies or even the fast fashion companies. What's driving it is culture, and we're going to talk about this. So basically what's happening now is you have this revolution happening very, very fast. I mean, we talked about decades, you know, in incremental change. We're in a weekly incremental change right now. Every week, things are changing, evolving. And it's basically driven by two types of people, builders and creators. And I'm going to take you through what they are. So what's really took us to this point is that acceleration that we've had the last 2 years. We thought everything slowed down and we had to stay home and everything, but actually, under the surface, everything accelerated in the digital world, that is. So this is what I'm picking up. Actually, it's really good, that slide, because you got your bit there. So essentially, for most of 2 centuries, things have been pretty much the same. Hasn't really changed. It's just accelerated and got bigger. Then the internet age, Web 1, came in, and that started to move things into the digital era. But until now, again, it's been slow. If you think about social media, it's basically, you know, a similar behavior that we were doing, but in an exponential way, controlled by a handful of companies. You heard of FANGs, and now the names are changing again. But here, what's going on today is something that never happened before, is that instead of business driving the evolution, culture and creativity is. And I think that's a really exciting thing. So nothing happens without consumers, right? So people are creating, but people are consuming. And the demand for this is now growing exponentially. So what you have is now a world population which is younger than ever before. So you have 32% of the global population that was born after 95. So that's very different from what we had before in terms of the demographic. Now the spending power of these people is also much higher. When we were kids, we didn't have that type of money, right? Now there's big spending power. And the fourth bit is this. Now social media has created basically an entire generation of people that after 8-10 seconds, they just switch off if they're not engaged, by the way. Another thing I put at the bottom, which is interesting, and is that for these kids, or young people, fashion has overtook like basic necessities like food as where they're going to put their money. 20% of their wallet goes toward fashion. So this is very important to understand. These are the people we're talking about. These are the people that consume this stuff. And that's what they made. They created this thing, which is basically a bunch of manufacturers in China that make the H&Ms and the Zara, et cetera, and thought, well, you know, if they're doing it, why can't we? Because we don't need retail anymore in a traditional way. We can just create a website, make it cheaper, faster, more convenient, and let's see what happens. And essentially, these guys created disruption into their own world. They wanted something that was faster, cheaper, and more convenient. In the US, by the way, I don't know if you know these numbers, but they're now as big as H&M and Zara put together. This is an $11 billion revenue for this company that came out of nowhere, essentially, right? So this is how fast this is moving. Show the speed again. We used to have that back in the days, in the early days of social media. I want you to apply it to now. I mean, look at the staggering numbers. What happens in 1 minute, right? I put that little arrow to TikToks, which is basically the most staggering piece here. I mean, we think about the amount we spend on Netflix or Amazon and all these, even Google. This dwarfs everything by far. I mean, even Instagram, look at the sort of difference between TikTok. Everybody thinks Instagram is sort of the leading thing. It's not. Right. I'm going to try to move this along because there's a lot to go through. But, you know, I'm just trying to give you, through this, I'm just going to give you some sort of information and also something more related to the business you're in, right? So we'll go through that pretty quickly. So what if Web, you guys know what Web3 is, by the way? Hands up if you know. Okay. Wow, okay. I thought it would be more than that. So essentially, it's very simple. Web 2, so the world we live in today, is basically a bunch of apps, right? You know most of these things. They connect to the cloud, and it's owned by one guy, Zuckerberg, you know, and the others, right? And basically, they control everything. It's all centralized. All the information is shared in this way. And the key thing here is humans are still part of the equation here. The world we're moving in, and by the way, this is not an option. This is not in 10 years' time. This is happening today. We're moving to a world where all these apps, let's call them that way, are connected between themselves, and they make decisions, they share information, and they connect to people by themselves, what we called autonomous and decentralized. Humans have very little to do, apart from building it, have very little to do to how it works and how it functions. The other piece is what we call the metaverse. You've all heard of the metaverse. Hands up, metaverse. See the difference? Web3 and metaverse. Metaverse is a good marketing spin, that's why. So the metaverse, basically the idea of it, right, is to create this 3D environment where everybody lives in, right? So the misconception is to think that there's loads of different metaverses and, you know, Facebook's got their own, etc. Everybody's trying to build their own thing. The truth of it is the metaverse is one place. And what we want to do with the metaverse is basically a place where you can work and you can get entertained, you can buy stuff within the same environment where there's no limits. There's no login. Oh, I need to go to buy a dress. Oh, I need to log into this platform, whatever. No, it's completely seamless. And that's what blockchain enables. So this is just to show how it works. So we live in a world right now where it's two-dimensional, right? It's your feed. Instagram feed, Facebook feed, two-dimensional. And it's a bunch of different websites linked together. What we're moving to is a spatial web. So essentially, what the internet's going to do next is not only connect websites and things within your phone or your computer, it's going to connect everything. Your fridge, your car, this room, this microphone, everything will be connected, right? So this is what's happening right now. And what that's going to do for us is, so we kind of live in this world right now where we have the physical world. It's like, yeah, this is the real world. That's where I live. There's a chair, there's a carpet. It's all real. I can touch it. And I can interact with a virtual world, digital stuff that's not real, but it's got some sort of value. Well, where we're moving to is now the blurring of these two things, right? So very soon, you're not going to have, and I know it feels weird to think about it, but very soon, you're not going to feel the difference between this carpet or a carpet in the metaverse, a real dress or a dress that you will wear in the metaverse, or your avatar will wear, or you have in your digital wardrobe. This is where we're going, and we're nearly there, and it's moving so fast. This is crazy. Usually I let people take pictures of this because it's like loads of stuff. But this is where we're going now, right? So all of these terms are things you're going to start hearing more and more and more and more. VR, so you know, 3D, 5G, all of these things are part of this new world of Web3 and the metaverse. Essentially, blurring the difference between the real, what we consider the real, and the digital world. So there are 5 key things part of this Web3 revolution, right? You all know the top one. You all heard of it. We'll talk a bit more about it. You all heard of crypto and Bitcoin. You've heard of blockchain, probably. You definitely heard about the metaverse. I've just seen that earlier. Maybe you haven't heard about DAOs. Oh, wow, we have a DAO fan there. Yeah. One. We'll go through that in a bit, but these are the 5 key things. DAOs is basically decentralized organizations. The same way I was talking about the apps earlier, that the apps there function on their own, essentially. Well, now you have companies themselves functioning on their own, where people don't run companies. Companies run themselves. So that's pretty cool. Below, again, a little bit of a nugget here. So Citibank did a study, and it's saying right now that the market in, 8 years? This will be worth up to 13 trillion as an economy, right? So this is why this is so important. I wanted to put that, before we move into sort of the deep dive, from a friend of mine, Benoit, another French guy. And Benoit created a company 3 years ago called Artifact. Who's heard of Artifact? Oh, not bad. Also marketing there, you know. So Benoit created a company 3 years ago where his vision was, I want to sell sneakers, but I want to sell digital sneakers, not real ones. And I met him in Paris. I always remember, I said, doesn't make any sense. Why would they buy digital sneakers? Left it there. And then, you know, a year later, he sells sneakers at Christie's. And there's this huge sale, and it's $12 million. And we're like, oh my God, what's going on? And since then, the company has been growing. And in November last year, Nike bought the company. And I'm not sure you've seen, but now Nike is releasing digital sneakers. So you see how fast this is going. In 3 years, 3 friends set up this company. 3. When they sold the company, it was still 3 people. About 60 million revenue, on the way, by the way. And they sell to Nike, and now they're changing the fabric of culture through a company like Nike. This is staggering. This has never happened in the history of business, in the history of culture. That's how fast it's moving. But what he's saying, and it's very important to read this, their vision, and it's him, but also all the builders. And this is one of the builders I mentioned at the very beginning. You've got builders and creators. He's a builder, and his vision is very clear. He believes that digital ownership, digital assets, things that you will own in the digital world, will be more valuable from a monetary perspective, but also emotionally, than physical ones. This is their vision, and this is what they're building. So whether you like the concept or not, all of these guys that are building this new world believe in that. And that's what we're going to be going through in the next stages of our civilization, essentially. All right, let's get into more. Oh. No, we'll leave it there. That's it. Chris, I've got a clicker problem.
Do we have somebody?
Oh, here we go. Perfect. Amazing. All right. How are we doing timing-wise? Because I don't want.
I think take some time. We've made a decision that we made an executive decision. We're not going to go into the panel, so we want you to kind of do your thing.
Okay. All right. So you're going to have me for a while. All right. So let's deep dive now into applications and cases around what's going on right now. All right. So what's really important is remembering that Web3, the metaverse, all of these things. This is not driven by business. These are not big businesses trying to change the world, trying to make you consume more. These are people like Benoit building businesses with a new vision, a new philosophy of life. And what they're trying to do is to use culture and creativity to change civilization, right? And this is the single most important thing I would say at this junction, right? Is everybody I talk to about the metaverse and all this stuff, like, but this is not real. Why is this so important? You know, I'm driving a car, I'm feeding my kids, I'm going to work. That doesn't matter. Well, it does. But what's important is not to think about something that is real or not real. Is it authentic? Is it real to you, right? It's the same way in culture in general, right? There's a lot of things out there, but the things that are authentic, they always work and they always grab people's attention and imagination. So an example, do you guys know about this, by the way? So there's this company in Holland, incredible bunch of people called The Fabricant. And they're probably the best 3D fashion studio on the planet right now. I've worked with them. They're amazing. And essentially what they did is, in 2020, this is not a new thing when you think about the speed of things, they sold the first digital dress for nearly $10,000. Think about that. Fortnite, in 1 month, sold 3.3 million pieces of merch on the game. That's equivalent to about $50 million in 1 month. Fortnite now is considered the 9th largest fashion company in the world, but you wouldn't know because it's not real. It's just a game. It's just kid playing. No, this is real. It's happening. So much so that now the brands want to be in that world. They want to be recognized. They want to build a business, not just for their brand, but to sell stuff as well. And we'll get to how it becomes physical in a minute. Love that tune. It's great. Then, obviously, the fashion industry rallied around this, and they created this fashion week on Decentraland, right? I mean, 108,000 unique attendees. Where are you going to get that in a room like this for a fashion show? It's impossible. So the possibilities around the metaverse and fashion is huge. This is a cool thing. So, Roblox, do you guys know Roblox? I mean, people have kids for sure, right? We spend all our money on it. So Roblox has been at the forefront of monetizing fashion, right? They're really, really good at it. And essentially, this is just an example. So they did this live show with Zara Larsson. By the way, when you say live show in the metaverse, it's not singing on the stage, singing a song. It's an experience. It's like a game, right? Where kids, young people kind of roam around and get involved, and they can connect with us. She was a real avatar in there, and she was doing stuff, and they could talk to her, and so they get much closer to the talent. But the real numbers are, there was 1.6 million people who came to that show. Think about this, 1.6 million, and generated 1 million sale of merch, right? So think about a physical event. There is no way in hell you can get close to this, right? It's real. It's real money, real fandom, real connections. And here's the biggie. Have you seen this? Who's got Spotify in the room? I always love to know. Yeah, wow, it's so big. So Spotify's just launched an island. They launched an island on Roblox. What is this? Well, basically now they're going to have artists as characters going in there, and you're going to be able to interact with them, and they'll be doing gigs and all kinds of things. Right now, the biggest growth of this was launched a few months ago. Merch. Kids are looking for merch, and they're buying merch by buckloads. But right now, it's only digital. What they're looking at right now, Roblox, is to see how do we transfer this into the physical. So when you buy a digital thingy like this, how can I get the physical one at home at the same time? The concept of the physical twin. All right, so let's get into the business side of it. So how do you do business? What does that mean for business, right? So it's not, Web3 is not like a gimmick, right? It's not like, hey, I'll do a little bit of Web3 stuff on the side, and maybe they'll make me some money, or I can drum up more customers, etc. Web3 is kind of philosophy of business. It changes the way you connect with everything around you, right? Your customers, your suppliers, even your employees. And what it does is, because it's built on a ledger, which is blockchain, I'll go into that in a bit, it creates more trustworthy relationships. It cuts the middleman. The information is shared directly, and is shared at all times immediately. So you don't have a log, going, okay, hey, you've sold X amount, and that's a statement. Like right now in music, right? I used to be a music producer. I get a statement every quarter about the music I sold on digital platforms, which I can know. If I go on the platform, I can see. But it took 3 months for them to get back to me and say, hey, here's a check for X. That's ridiculous, right? This is what this is going to change, is you're going to be able to earn your money directly. There'll be less people in the middle, so you make more money as a creator. It goes faster, and it's more trustworthy. The other thing is, I love this picture, it's a bit funny. But basically, what Web3 is going to do is companies are going to be able to reprogram life, right? So essentially, and this is a McKinsey thing, I wanted to put it there because it's also very relevant to Kornit and what's going on with the technology there, is that essentially what people believe in that sector is that automation and personalization is going to be the tip of the iceberg when it comes to innovation. And what they're saying essentially is you don't want this anymore, right? Why are you not working in a room and you know that dress is yours and that's it? It's one of one, right? When you go to the beach and you got your shorts on, and then, oh, wow, you look really cool with your shorts on. Somebody comes out of water, the same one. Oh, my God, no. I thought it was really cool. So this is the end of this era that Patrick took us through, where you create bulk stuff, and then you try to sell as much as you can, and you make it cool so everybody wants it. It's not going to work like that anymore. These are some business principles of doing business in Web3 with blockchain, right? So, and you can see there the philosophy behind it, right? The first thing, anti-monopoly. And you might think like this is like a Marxist thing. But in a way it is, right? So the way that Web3 is going to be built, and it's built right now, it allows privacy. It allows people to build things in a way that they are not profit-led. Some are not. And so essentially it regulates itself in a different way. It's highly secure, so it's very difficult to hack things, to change information on the blockchain. It's the age of data ownership. Every single people in this room will be owning their data. That means also you can monetize it. You can do whatever you want with it. Interoperability, meaning that this concept earlier of if I go on Facebook, Twitter, anything, I can just go from one side to the other without having to think about it. And the permission-less blockchain is the key that makes it happen. Essentially, when you do things on the internet, blockchain lets things happen as you do it, rather to have to log in. So it's like, oh, now I want to go to my Instagram account, or now you don't have to do that. It's done in the background, right? So the epitome of this is this incredible project. Not many people know about this, right? But basically, this factory, this is a BMW car factory, doesn't exist. This is crazy. I mean, you can zoom in, and see that guy working on it. You can see everything that's happening real time, but it's not real. It's a digital twin of a factory. And you think, well, why should I do that? You know, it's not a game. Well, how do you monetize this? Well, basically with this, they can optimize how a factory works. They can change things to make it better. And they don't have to do it in real life, right? By putting people in danger, also it's very expensive. So what BMW decided to do is to create this sort of omniverse, which is what NVIDIA is doing, right? And so they calculate the best way to do things, and then they implement that and build new factories based on this model. But also, in the future, what's going to happen is everything happening there will be run by robots mostly. So the robots will be integrated into this metaverse. So as you optimize the metaverse, it optimizes real-time what's happening in the factory. So this is really, really important. This is a watershed moment, by the way. The first metaverse or digital factory. Okay, the big topic today, NFTs. Who owns an NFT? Let's check this out. Wow. Okay, right. So, and there's no surprises there, right? So basically, 98% of NFTs are owned by 2% of digital wallets, right? So right now, it's been a very secluded community, but it's about to change. So what we know about NFTs right now is they're pictures, and you pay a lot of money for it, and maybe you make some money, or maybe you lose some money. It's very speculative. But the truth about NFTs is that it's a utility. It's basically a key that lets you connect to things, that lets you get involved with things, and generate value more than the value of the actual piece of artwork. So, have you heard of the Bored Ape Yacht Club? Yeah, okay. So these guys are starting now to release real merch in the market. But the twist is, you can only buy it with their crypto, right? So straight away, they're building these new communities, right, around their product. It's not, for these guys, again, they're builders. They're the same as Benoit earlier mentioned. They want to build a world in a new way. And for them, creating a community around their product is more important to make it available to everyone. This is a big shift in thinking, where the fast fashion, their sole purpose in life is to make things available to as many people as possible. This is actually doing the revert. And this is how it works in practice. So this is what's coming now. Who has a digital wallet? Yes, that's starting to go, right? So you're going to have some crypto, and that means you can trade with NFTs, etc. So what's going to happen now is you're going to have this idea of token gating and POAPs, right? So token gating simply says you can get a token, i.e. an NFT or a piece of digital key, and that opens up an opportunity or access to something, usually access to a community. And when you're part of that community, then you get access to things like products. So Nike, you can very, very easily see, like a loyalty program today, which is, most of them don't work. These companies have millions and millions of people on their books. They don't know what to do with them. Well, here you have a very simple way to apply that. So Nike could easily say, okay, all of these products are going to be now under lock and key, and you join the community to be able to have access to some things. The fact that you're going through MetaMask, a digital wallet, means also that at that point, you're on the blockchain. That means that everything you do, everything that happens is recorded in the ledger. Again, a more trusted relationship, your data that you own, nobody owns it, Nike doesn't have access to that data, and this is the start, right? The other thing is POAPs, very quickly. So POAPs is a proof of attendance. So you go to a concert, for example, and what you're going to get is once you're at the concert, you're going to get airdropped or something like that. You're going to get a POAP, which is basically, again, an NFT that proves that you were at the concert. This is your sort of wristband of the future, if you want. But that wristband will be connected and allow you to have access, again, to things, be part of the artist's fan club, etc. So look at NFTs in this use case as a key to create community and to add value to the community. Very simple things. Right. The other thing is digital ID. Everybody's talking about digital ID for clothing, especially in the luxury sector. But again, with the same concept I've just mentioned here, attached to that NFT here that you had to unlock that jacket, you're going to have a digital ID of that jacket, meaning you own it, but it also gives you all the information of where it comes from, where it was made, how much, what was the carbon footprint, a lot of information there. And so that means that when you want to trade it, sell it, resell it, the garment carries this with it. And then the last bit in use case today on NFTs is AR use and digital twin. So again, back to our friends at Artifact, they are now Nike. They're launching this sort of collection of hoodies called Genesis, right? And essentially, how they call this is their world, right? They can have it both as a clone wearable, so you have basically an avatar, and you can have this really cool, or forgeable physical piece. I love the language, right? Because ultimately, these guys still consider that anything physical can be forgeable. So anybody can, somebody somewhere can say, hey, I'm going to print these things, and I'm going to sell it for loads of money, because obviously you have to have the NFT if you want to get it, etc. But essentially what that means is you can have this, so you buy this hoodie, so you can wear it on your avatar. You can wear it as AR, so Snapchat, Instagram, you can wear it in a picture. And you can have the physical one. So think about these 3 layers of ownership that you have within just one product. All right, so I'm going to jump into how Web3 can unlock other things, right? And the big thing we talked about earlier is the burning flames of what fashion is doing to the planet. And a lot of companies now are trying to change this. But it's very difficult, not because the technology is not here. So this is a company based in LA called Ambercycle. And they're probably one of the leader in polyester recycling, polyester being plastic, right? And so I was there just before Christmas, spent some time with them. It's incredible. When you see this working, it really makes your heart pump. And essentially what they're able to do is to take any clothes from landfills, overstock, dead stock, everything. They put it in a huge ball, essentially, with chemicals and things, but don't let that fool you. It's all being managed and recycled. Essentially, at the bottom, you got pure polyester coming out. And they turn into pellets, then put into yarn, and back into the manufacturing, right? So they're able to do this today, and they're building now bigger plants to be able to increase volume. So this is a very interesting company. But the most interesting thing there is that when it goes back through that process, it gets tagged. So through the entire chain, from being manufactured back to the retailer, the garment will still have a tag of where it came from so that it can be recycled. So the recycling thing, obviously, today is, I'm not going to get into it, but it's very difficult to recycle anything because you can only really recycle something that has one fabric in it, right? Whether it's cotton, polyester, or something like that. And then when you have buttons and metal pieces, then it becomes impossible, right? But with this, now you're going to have a section of clothing having this QR that you can recycle 100% with minimum impact. So this is happening today, right? But why is it working so well is this is on the blockchain. This is a Web3 company, right? So you might think, well, it's a physical company. No, it only works because it is part of the Web3 ecosystem. The other cool thing about it is that they have this laser microscope thing. I mean, I'm going to nerd out for a minute, but they can look into the fiber and tell you the molecular structure of it. And based on the molecular structure, they can tell you exactly where it came from. So it can tell you, it was from these 20 T-shirts made into one, and they can recognize where it came from. So the technology is there today. It's not a question of technology. As we said, it's a question of will and business model. Another cool company, Kala. Anybody heard of Kala? Yeah. So they're very cool. You should check them out. So essentially, what they enable you to do is to build your brand on your phone, create product, connect your supply chain, manage a team. Most of them are going to be freelance. Open a store, connect to the store, and manage your customers, all in one product. Right? So this is the added benefit now of Web3 when it comes to developing brands. Today, it's still, you have to set up your Shopify store, you have to connect to your supply chain, you got to bring all these apps, and you got to promote, and there's a lot of work. This is being streamlined now and organized so that you can actually set up your brand tomorrow on your phone, get into the market. That's another benefit of what Web3 is bringing. All right. Last bit into sort of Web3 is DeFi and cryptocurrency, right? Have you heard of DeFi? Yeah. So DeFi is basically decentralized finance. So you have the banks, you have DeFi. DeFi is not a bank, but it's a way to manage money. And what we're seeing now is brands, and you've heard that Gucci is now going to accept Bitcoin. Now, the whole thing about accepting Bitcoin, for us, we just feel, oh, yeah, it's a nice gimmick, and it's for consumer preference, because if they want to buy in crypto, they can buy in crypto. But it's not. What's behind this is now brands are seeing the opportunity for themselves to become banks. Because ultimately, they know you better. They know you really well, actually, if they do the job well. And they trade with a lot of money. And essentially, what they can do today is embedded finance. So essentially, when you have a transaction today, they have these other companies on top, Kornit, etc., right? Which are sort of the new banks, everyone. But the brands now are wising up to this. So hang on a minute, why do I need Klarna? I can do this myself. Right now, with normal money, fiat money, what we call it sort of real money, it's very difficult to do because you have to have licenses, and it's a long process to do that. But with crypto, you don't need to. So essentially now, brands are playing with this concept of, if I have a crypto business and I sell things and people pay in crypto, then I can create my own bank and essentially start doing things like Klarna, but with crypto. So this is what's underlining there, and all driven by the same principles and the same technologies we talked about Web3. Yeah. Okay. 2 minutes. I'm gonna wrap it up. Yeah. So I'm gonna do two things now. One is, this is the thing that you need to remember. Whatever you do now in whatever business, is this: community, community, community. Whatever you do, think about that, because the access that we've had so far, Facebook, you pay money, you get access to people. Maybe they purchase, maybe they convert, maybe not. And the price is going astronomical right now. All of this setup is going to go away. Why? Because essentially, DAOs are going to replace that system. What I mentioned earlier, companies that run themselves, essentially. What does that mean? Basically, a DAO is a community. It's people that invest, that are part of something. So let's say you could have a knitting group, and they become a DAO, right? And suddenly they become a huge global thing with thousands and thousands of members. Well, if you're in a knitting business, you want access to that DAO. But you don't get access by paying. You're going to have to get tokens, become part of the community, and generate value for the community. And then you get the reward, right? This is a very different way to look at business. So I'm going to go through just quickly 2 slides about the creators themselves, right? So this is sort of the business landscape. And then you have this mega opportunity today, which is a creator economy. So you have about 50 million of creators right now in the world, mostly using TikTok, sorry. Right? This is incredible. Think about this. The platforms they use and the revenues, they all come from one place. So this is more like take a picture and analyze it later kind of thing. The value of things, Andy Warhol's picture there was sold in 1998 for 17 million. This was minted, sold for 70 million. Same thing. Now she's gone for 200 million. So that, give it another 20 years, let's see the value. Kids are making loads of money. This is basically an industry worth 100 billion today. This is something that nobody realizes, right? So these kids on YouTube, TikTok, that's how much they're selling. So you have people like Ferocious, who's an artist, sold 20 million worth of digital art in 24 hours. You have, her, right? But she's a creator. In 3 years, she built a $3 billion business. Then you got, smaller, a mom that set up this thing. She was doing videos online. She's selling tons of sweatshirts. Gamers, right, like this guy. I mean, this is how much merch it sells in a month, by the way. He's top of the tree, he's number one, yes. But this is what's going on, right? The other stat is that YouTube The floor is going up as well. More than ever, people are making over $10,000 in selling merchandise. This is merchandise sales. Our friends Artifact, now fashion houses in the metaverse becomes real things. And mainstream, right? It's all happening. Shopify is driving this, by the way. And also, they're getting into the action. So they signed, you know this guy, right? Drake, yeah, that's a rapper, guy in America. He has a brand called OVO. Yes, yeah, right. Thank you. But they're all Canadians. Bieber, everyone's Canadian. So Shopify, what they're doing is they set up this new department at Shopify, focused on doing deals with these guys. So now they're signing them. So OVO is now a signed brand to Shopify. Think about what's going on with culture today. All right, so I'm going to finish with this because that's the most important thing. So whatever you do from this point on, think about two things. If you build a brand, if you start a brand, it has to be born in culture and it has to move at the speed of culture, right? And it has to be wrapped into community, like we said earlier. TikTok, $1 billion fund for creator. This is all happening. Money is being pumped into this industry. You can benefit from it. So that's for picture as well. These are opportunities. So first of all, capture this get involved, capture this Web3 and economy right now. Be part of it. You can build loyalty with NFTs, like we said earlier. You can host virtual events or virtual spaces that 24 hours that people can have access from anywhere around the world. Create trusted connection with customers, suppliers, and through blockchain. And be a leader, provide a gateway, be a part of making this thing real for everyone. I'll leave you with that. This is my top 10. I always do that at the end. Things that I need to look at right now. Some of it is blue sky, some may or may not happen. This is today what's going on in the fashion business that you need to take care of. Live stream is going to become the biggest thing on the planet. It's already in China. It's a $400 billion market. It's coming here, and it's being powered by TikTok, etc. New acquisition channels. Everything's too expensive now to buy advertising. So community building is the key, and there's a lot of now companies launching their own platforms. Creator-powered, so creators to sell products. Creator-led, creators to create their own companies. One-click checkout, so the speed at which you sort of get from purchasing to getting through the checkout. Sustainability, transparency, you've heard a lot of this yesterday especially. Own your own resale. This is something that's really moving extremely fast. Brands that are owning their own resale now and putting it part of their own experience. NFTs and utility, as we said, and the post-purchase experience. I can't go through all of this now because I'm being pushed. But take pictures, think about it, and I'm around if you want to talk more about it. Thank you very much.
Just, I kind of want to think about how I can summarize what you've just seen for the last hour or so. Firstly, just if I could ask you again, just to thank Patrick and Bobby for some really insightful conversations. Thank you. And obviously, I'm not really in control of the timing of everything that goes on here, so very rude of me to have to push, etc. And I know that many of you would have been happy if we could have perhaps arranged some water and coffees. We could have stayed all afternoon. We have another show coming up. I think the most important thing there is about our responsibility. We can't slow down this consumer change. We can't slow down this kind of growth opportunity, the on-demand, the needing it now, etc. But I think what we can do is make small changes in a way that creates that kind of world that Patrick was presenting us with, which is a little bit more joined up about the community. You heard the word community a lot today. I think we're all kind of interested in the community, the traditional community, and obviously the online, creator community, etc. as well. And I think there's a huge thing that if we all take a giant step forward together, that actually this change can happen. We are so delighted that you took some time to hang out with us for this morning. We really appreciate it again. There's a show coming up now in about 5 minutes. I think they're just finishing rehearsals. And then after that, there's actually some buses that will take you to our Technology Innovation Center for those of you that have registered and are interested, where you can actually see our technology driving a lot of what you've seen. So the production this morning that you saw, all produced on Kornit, sustainably, on demand in the last 3 weeks. unique applications, etc. So there is a message from us there, but it's about making what we need, not just making for the uncertainties of the future. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.